Hello and welcome to How To Automotive. Today we're working on a Ford Mustang 2005 through 2010 4.0 liter engine. We're going to be changing out the high pressure power steering hose. And I'm going to walk you step by step through the process, so stay tuned for that. So the power steering pump and pressure hose are underneath the air snorkel here, so we're going to get started by removing that. Removing the air snorkel is pretty simple. We're going to start by loosening up the clamp right here at the throttle body. After we get that loosened up, next we need to get this vent hose off. This goes to the breather system here. There's a little tab underneath here. We're going to push up and rotate it and then pull the hose off of the snorkel. This is the plastic tab that we're pushing on. Now we're going to unplug the mass airflow sensor. There's a safety tab on there that we need to push back, the little red tab. Just slide it back. I use a screwdriver to do that, and then squeeze the black connector and pull off. Now on the back of the airbox lid, we're just going to squeeze the tabs and lift up the lid and then pull off. The pressure line is mounted right behind the pulley here, so we need to work on getting that out. I noticed the vent line was in my way here, so I kind of just lifted it up and tucked it over here behind the wiring out of our way so it's not going to bother us. Now what we're going to do is loosen up these 3 bolts before we take the belt off. There's a couple ways we can do that. You can use a universal pulley holding tool like this here, and then the wrench, and loosen it up. And you can see it just wedges itself on the pulley and holds it still. If you don't have something like that, a long screwdriver wedged between the bolts will loosen them up as well. My favorite tool for jobs like this is the stubby impact, because you can get it in here. It's just enough room with a 10mm socket and crack them free. We don't want to take them all the way off yet, just crack them free. Now we can go ahead and remove the drive belt. There's a tensioner here. You need a 3/8 drive ratchet like this one here. And you'll see a spot where you can put the ratchet in on the tensioner here. Once you got the ratchet on the tensioner here, you're going to rotate it counterclockwise, and that's going to spring the pressure off the belt. Now with your other hand, you can slip your belt off. Now you can go ahead and tuck the belt out of the way. Remove the 3 bolts, and then at the very tip of the power steering pump here is a plastic cover. You put a little 5mm Allen screw in here and turn it counterclockwise and screw it off. This holds the pulley on kind of when you're assembling it. Now you can pull the pulley off and set aside. Now to reduce the amount of mess we make, I like to take the power steering reservoir cap off and suck out all the fluid from the reservoir here. I'm using a fluid extracting tool. If you don't have something like this, a good old-fashioned turkey baster works really well. Now you're going to need some sort of bucket to go underneath the vehicle to catch the fluid that comes out. Now we're going to work on getting the high pressure hose off the power steering pump right here. Now when taking off power steering hoses and lines, it's best to use a lined wrench such as this one here. This is an 18mm, but as you see here, it doesn't quite fit on there because it's mounted up in the housing. So I'm going to try to crack it free with a flank drive wrench here, open end. And that just means it has serrated teeth on the open end of the wrench to help grip the fastener. So just as I expected, the wrench felt like it's going to strip around the fitting. So I'm going to take the pump off, and that will give me more access to the fitting here. But I'm also going to go ahead and take the hose off completely and just pull the hose and pump out all as one unit, because we have plenty of room to do that on this vehicle. Then we'll mount it in the vise and take the hose off. Right now we're going to remove the reservoir feed hose here. So I'm using a pair of hose clamp pliers, slide the clamp back, and then we'll pull that hose off. So hopefully your fitting came loose and you don't have to do this by removing the pump like I am here. So I'm going to work that hose off. To help get it off, I used a pry bar, and I pry it against the lip of the hose and the power steering mounting bracket. A little bit of the power steering fluid is going to spill out. That's why we have the bucket below. We'll also clean this up later with soap and water. I'm going to go ahead and zap off the 3 bolts here using my stubby impact. Hand ratchet tools work just fine for this. I will also link up some of the tools that I think will be beneficial for doing this job in the description. That way, if you need to pick any of those up, you can find those links there. So now the pump is unbolted. If the hose was able to come off, we could just pull it out right now. What we need to do now is go underneath and disconnect the rest of the high pressure power steering hose and pull the 2 parts out together. So now you're going to need to jack up the front of your vehicle high enough to where you can crawl underneath it. Use floor jacks and jack stands if you're doing this at home. Now we're underneath. We're looking at the high pressure hose here that's mounted onto the front of the rack and pinion here, just behind where the radiator is mounted at. So if you look at the hose here, you'll see how it kind of loops around, and it has a couple support brackets. We need to unbolt these brackets here and you follow it around, and then there's going to be a second one up here. We're just going to loosen that nut there. Then if you follow it around the opposite way, you'll see it leads up to the rack here. There's a high pressure switch we need to unplug here, and then you follow it up a little further, then there's one bolt right here that we're going to remove and pull the line off. The upper one we just need to loosen is slotted on the bracket there, so just loosen it up and then you can slide it off the mount. Now with the help of a screwdriver, a flat blade screwdriver, I'm going to pry the little tab right here on the high pressure switch and pull the connector off. Now with a 10mm wrench, I'm going to loosen up the fastener holding the line into the rack and pinion, and you should be able to spin it out. You can also use a socket and extension and get on it to whatever's easiest for you. Now you can flip the hold down out of the way and then give the hoses a little wiggle and pull them both up. Now if you were able to get the line loose from the pump, at this point you'll be able to just pull the hose down and out of the vehicle. If yours was stuck on there like mine is, then I'll show you what we're going to do next. So as you can see, the hose is just hanging here. So what we're going to do now is go back up top, and we're going to pull the pump and the hose out all as one assembly here. You just kind of take your time, don't yank it or anything, just reach down here and help guide it through the crevices here and pull it up and out. Of course, the hose was snagging on a few things, so I had to reach down here and squeeze it together to make it a little smaller and pull it up through. But because this is the 4-liter smaller engine, we have a lot of room in here, and I was able to pull it out just like this. So now I'm going to throw the pump in the vise here and then use a line wrench to get that fastener loose. This is an 18mm wrench. So this worked out perfectly. The line broke free, it didn't round it out or anything, so now I can switch over to my regular wrench here and go ahead and just spin it off a little quicker. Now that I got the line off, I'm going to go ahead and mount the pump back into its bracket here, start the 3 bolts and tighten those down, and then also we're going to put the feed hose from the reservoir back on. So I started all 3 bolts first before tightening any of them down. And then I kind of make sure it's all centered up here and use my impact tool to run them in and tighten them up. Once that was done, I used my pair of pliers here and slid on the hose and the clamp back into position. When I put these squeeze clamps on, I like to put them back in the exact same way that they came off. So there's witness marks on the hose. You just line it up with the witness marks. And then if anything needs to be adjusted, such as this clamp here, adjust that now. A new hose just came in, and I wanted to share a few of the part numbers. I will link them up in the description of the video. That way if you need to pick a hose up, you can find that there. This is made by Gates Belt Company, a high quality aftermarket part. Before we install the new high pressure hose, we need to steal the high pressure switch off the old one. This switch is designed to tell the computer when the vehicle is turning at low speeds, and what it does is it helps control the idle. So when you're turning left or right, it'll stabilize the idle by sending a signal to the PCM to help maintain that. I just used a 14mm open-end wrench to take it off and then reinstall it onto our new line here. Just run it into its bottoms out and then get about a quarter turn. There is an O-ring on the end. You want to inspect that. If it's in bad shape, replace the O-ring. Depending on where you get your parts, some of them may have the O-rings already on the hose, and some of them may have them in a little bag that you need to install the O-rings on it. In this case, on one end, it needed to have an O-ring installed. I'm putting this little plastic cap back over it so the O-ring is not damaged when we go to install this. We'll take that off at the last moment. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to feed the main portion of the hose down in front of the power steering pump where we took it out originally. Feed that down, and then I'll start the top line at the pump. Just want to take your time and start it. I had to use the wrench to spin the actual fitting into the power steering pump. I couldn't do it with my fingers. It was a little too snug. Once I got the line started, I went ahead and ran it all the way in until it bottomed out, and then about a quarter turn more. Now back underneath the vehicle, I'm going to go ahead and take the safety cap off the line here. Go ahead and route it into position where it's going to fit into the rack and pinion here. And then I'm going to start the 2 lines. One's a feed line, one's a return line. I'm going to start the 2 lines in there in the fittings, they have O-rings on them, and then there's the little catch here that swings in and locks both the hoses in place. So I'll swing that in place and then I'll start the bolt. This was a little bit of a finicky process, so I got both of the lines started, got the little catch on there and started the bolt. Now I'm just going to run that down until it's snug. So I'm also holding the hose into position right where I want it to be, and then I'll go ahead and tighten that down. Once you've got the line secure, now we're going to mount the mounting brackets here. Yours may or may not have come already pre-installed on the hose, depending on where you get your hose. Mine did not. I had to put the brackets on, so I'm going to squeeze the little bracket into position, start the 8mm bolt here that held it on right here, and then run that in until it's snug. Then I'll mount the upper bracket after that. After I mount the upper bracket, then what I did was take some high quality degreaser and soap and water and sprayed everything down and got the all the residue from the power steering fluid off and cleaned up as best I can. Now I'm going to go back up top. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the pulley back onto the pump here, and I'll put a little bit of blue thread locker on the threads of the bolt. That way these don't vibrate loose and come back off. You want to make sure you don't install the pulley upside down or backwards. So look at the witness marks. You'll see how it went on before you took it off. So go ahead and put the pulley back on the same way. Start the 3 bolts. You can also go ahead and install that little plastic cover that went over the tip of the pump there. Run that in with that 5mm Allen. It's just a snug fit. Don't go bearing down on it too hard. It's made out of plastic. Now you can tighten up the pulley bolts here, run those in until they're snug. I like to run them in with the impact until they're snug or bottom out, and then what I do is I use a spanner wrench to hold it in place and then go over it by hand. That way I can make sure that everything's evenly tightened down. Now we're ready to install the belt. Here is a diagram of how the belt routes. Just follow the diagram and reroute the belt. Now you can swing the tensioner over counterclockwise once you get the belt all routed, and then go ahead and slip the belt onto the last pulley here. And then once you get it mounted on there, release the tensioner on the tensioner, and then double check that everything is on all the grooves and pulleys on all of them. Now that we got the belt installed, now we're going to install the air cleaner assembly here. So you're going to hook it on the front of the box here. It has a couple little hook spots. Press the lid down till it clicks into place, and then we put the mass airflow sensor back in, plug it in, push that little red safety in. Then you can take the vent hose here. All you do is push it on, and it should lock on automatically. Put it onto the throttle body and tighten up the hose clamp. Now you can fill the power steering reservoir up with Mercon transmission fluid. This is the fluid recommended for this vehicle, so go ahead and fill it up. I like to fill it all the way up to the very top of the fill neck, and when you start it up, it's going to drop the level a little bit. So if you fill it up to the full mark and then start it, it'll drop down and it'll be low on fluid. It'll suck air and make a bunch of whining noise. So I like to fill it all the way to the max, to the very tip of it, and then start it up, and then the level will automatically drop down, and then we can go from there to adjust the level. So I started the vehicle up. I did not turn the steering wheel left or right at all, and I came back here and double checked it. I needed to add just a tad bit more to the full mark. Now you're not going to fill it all the way up to the top. Now you're just going to look for the recommended line on the bottle, fill it up to that. Once that is achieved with the engine running, then we can go back in and turn the steering wheel lock to lock. I'd also like to take this time right now to look for power steering fluid leaks, make sure everything is sealed up, and just give everything a thorough inspection, and then I'll go back in and turn that steering wheel left and right. This helps bleed out any air that may be in the system. Once we've done this, then I'll double check the fluid level one more time, and I'll either add or remove if needed. So I will link up the parts and tools that I used in this video. I'm Brian Esser from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.